You're listening to a web-only special from the Dispatch from WPRB News. This is a series of reflections on the Olympic Games that took place in China recently. First, from Ken Silverstein of Harper's Magazine, and second, from Anne-Marie Slaughter, the dean of the Woodrow Wilson School here at Princeton. Both of them discuss the potential impacts these games had on Chinese culture and politics. Enjoy. Finally, you wrote the piece, and the piece came out, I guess, before the Olympics. And I'm curious, looking back now, is there anything that you saw during the Olympics that sort of fit in with some of the points that were made in this piece?
Well, I mean, the most obvious thing was that NBC, which, through NBCG, General Electric had paid, I don't remember the precise figure, but it was hundreds of millions of dollars to broadcast the Olympics. And, I think that the coverage was generally pretty sympathetic to China. I mean, there were some critical pieces done by NBC News, but one has to wonder about whether the stake that NBC had and the fact that I think it put him in a difficult position in terms of doing critical reportage. But one thing that really stood out was that NBC hired their expert China analyst was a guy named Joshua Cooper Ramo, who was he opined during the opening ceremonies, and he went on and on with wonderful things to say about China, and he talked about it. He said, it's a nation that you're about to put a match to the fuse of a rocket, and it just talked about how important China was, offered a very glowing portrayal. Well, what NBC didn't acknowledge was that this guy worked for Henry Kissinger for his, I think he was the managing director of the office in Beijing. Okay, fine. Let the guy come on and let him offer his opinion. But again, let's at least disclose that, he works for Kissinger, who is notoriously pro-Beijing, who, himself has been embarrassed to the point that when he writes an opinion piece in a newspaper now has been forced to disclose, just by embarrassment, that, I have a consulting firm that does business in China. I mean, let's at least have transparency about these relationships. And that's really, I think, something that's sadly lacking now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm overestimating the impact that these financial ties have on the opinion of commentators. But at minimum, if there's nothing there, well, then there's no problem certainly in disclosing the ties when you appear on TV or when you appear on National Public Radio or when you write an opinion piece in a newspaper. At least get put out your what your real relationship is, so readers can evaluate how objective or unobjective a commentator may be.
Ken Silverstein, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Feel that the Olympics have changed anything, and if so, how have they changed either the world's view of China or even human rights issues or issues within China itself?
Well, I think it certainly was a triumph for the Chinese government. The world saw what we saw in China, traveling around. Again, as I said, the scale is so vast, and the accomplishments are stunning, and you saw that. I mean, everybody took a collective breath, which is what the Chinese wanted, and I think that certainly happened. I think also many people got a different understanding of ordinary Chinese people, rightly or wrongly. I mean, there's no such thing as ordinary Chinese people in 1.3 billion, but certainly the many people in Beijing who were trained to be hostesses, to be helpful, the tone of the Olympics, right down to American and Chinese gymnasts embracing each other, which I had never seen. It presented China not as a superpower on the make, but in very much in terms of peaceful rise, a country that wants to continue to rise, wants to continue to develop, but does not want conflict, is not trying to knock anybody else off the throne, which again was something I think the Chinese government wanted. Again, in terms of human rights, it was actually surprising to me that there was not more demonstrating either among the athletes or others, but I think there was a sense among many people, the athletes, of kind of the Olympic spirit that actually overcame, or I shouldn't say overcame, but overwhelmed the way many people were looking at Darfur or other issues where we've been trying to hold China to account.